Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello, and welcome to episode 79 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we talk all things flying and aviation in midlife. My name is Ben. I'm a commercial rated or certificated pilot here in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Fly Cessna 182. We call it the Beast. Actually got to fly today. Also, we have with us tonight, as always, my friend Brian, a private pilot in Nashville, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie. Flies a Cherokee 180 we named Lucy, and he's also tailwheel endorsed. I got it right this time. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you back. As much as it was great to have Chris here, and as professional of a host as he is, and as slick of a radio character he is, we are glad to have you back, Ben, because you are the maybe a little rougher around the edges, now bearded, but the heart and soul, the sage of the Midlife Pilot Podcast.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's the nicest thing anybody said to me all week. I appreciate that. Also joining us tonight is my friend Ted, sport pilot extraordinaire, living out on the dream world of the West Coast in Portlandia, flying a flight-designed CTLS that we nicknamed the Egg. Ted, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. You're looking well.
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice to have the anchor of the show back. Yeah.
So. I listened to the episode with Chris, and as I mentioned earlier, it really kind of sickens me how he can just step right back in and just sound as smooth as anybody possibly can. And yet I still, 30, 40 episodes into it, I feel like I'm still kind of really rough around the edges. But that's okay.
I don't know if you ever saw this, but he's been doing all this music stuff, and he's putting on these community symphonic show things in his town. And he had shared a clip of him on the local news explaining what he was doing. And it was, in a news studio and morning show kind of thing. And I was just so amazed because he's as good at that, if not better, when he's actually on camera, which is kind of crazy. But, we're just those guys in the gravel part of the parking lot, we're just
into that
on the edges, and people, I think, can relate to our inadequacy.
Maybe that's our most identifying feature.
What was the title of your YouTube video on that? Was it Gravel Parking Lot?
No, but it was, now I can't remember. I don't even remember what the title of the video was.
We'll put that in the doobly-doo, because I remember that video.
Maybe one of my all-time favorites of yours.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called. But basically it was all about, it had a whole opening sequence that was about the gravel part of the high school parking lot. And that's where the metalheads were. Like, that was where the people were that you wanted to hang out with, Right. I was just talking about sort of how the parking lot had its own kind of socioeconomic kind of layout. You'd have the rich kids with their parents' cars over here, and then you'd have like the metalheads that, worked on their own cars over here, and everything in between. But and as a side note, I think that I realized anytime I see the picture of a parking lot from the mid 80s, I look at it and I go, I want every single car in that parking lot. I want them all. Bring me the first gen Caravan, manual transmission with the wood paneling. Bring it all. I want it all. I want the whole. I want to buy everything from 1985.
So there's a shop down the street from us that has just recently opened up, and it is nothing but cars from the 70s and 80s, and he is restoring them. And it's not, it's the Oldsmobile Delta 88s. I mean, it's the, heavy metal 3-ton cars. It, a lot of cutlasses.
What's the name of the place?
I can't think of the name of it. He just opened it up. I don't even know if he has a sign outside yet.
See, I've got to get in on that. Even though I have $0 to do anything like that, I just want to know what I'm missing.
I will send you the location. Maybe there is a business name on Google Maps, but I'll find that for you.
Yeah, I have 2 cars, 1985. I think I think I've probably pushed the bounds of what I can do there. With any permission.
Yeah, I get it.
I do like looking at the performance cars at the specs of them in the 70s and 80s. Like you look at the V8 Corvettes through the years, and you look, and by 1980, the V8 is making like 140 horsepower.
Yeah.
It's like they somehow got the least amount of power possible out of these vehicles. Like it just like kept going down as like emissions came in and all of that. And
the malaise era.
The cool thing about this place is every time I drive by it, there's a car in the parking lot that's a car that I've forgotten about. Oh, I remember that car.
Yeah.
And there's nothing special about the car itself. It's just you don't ever see them anymore. And it's beautiful paint job. It looks like it just came out of the showroom. So anyway, I'll send you a link to it. Let's cover a few housekeeping issues. What do you say?
Yeah.
We broadcast live on YouTube, usually every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. We have a very active chat group tonight, a lot of regulars. We'd love for you to join us and join the conversation. The audio podcast is at iTunes, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are found. Please be sure to subscribe or follow whatever the app asks, and you could just take a little time to leave a review. That would be great. 5 stars, please. We love getting feedback and your suggestions, so send us emails or voicemails. You can do so at midlifepilotpodcast.com. And finally, you can find all the links to our Patreon, our contact information, everything, the merch store. I'm assuming is still up and running. You can find that all at midlifepilotpodcast.com. So we did get some feedback that we'd like to dive into. Brian, do you have it pulled up?
Yeah. Which one do you want me to get into, you think?
I like Trevor's or Marco's, either one of those.
Sure. All right. So we'll start. I'll read Mark's and Trevor's.
Okay.
Mark O says, really enjoy your conversations as a midlife pilot. So much of where you guys are in your journeys resonates with me. Thanks for taking the time. Simple, short, sweet, and we appreciate that. It's really amazing how shocking it can be for people to feel resonated with in the midlife pilot modality. It's kind of like, it's almost shocking that you're, sort of on your own until you're not,
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, I was already through my parts of when you and Chris started out, but what you were saying still resonated with me. So it doesn't really matter where you are in your journey. It's you can resonate with everybody at any point in their journey.
Yes, and you can even re-experience post-traumatic things. So
that's exactly right.
It works all directions.
There was a chat in Discord. I think it was today. It was when did you start using ForeFlight and go off paper charts? And I was like, oh, those days. Yeah. Things you forget about.
Yeah.
I'm such a kind of Luddite in many ways, and the one area of life where I'm just not is that. Bring me the ForeFlight.
Yeah.
All right. So Trevor, a Landomatic member on Patreon. I've been listening to the podcast for a long time now, since the early Chris Moran days, OG Midlife Pilot days. While I'm not a pilot yet, I've loved aviation all my life and spent way too much time consuming all forms of aviation content.
And so, by the way, Trevor bumped his membership up to the Hershey bar, so thank you for that, Trevor.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. I love that too, because, and I think we're seeing a little bit more of this, and actually it excites me a lot to have listeners that are not flying. And so we did that episode a couple episodes ago where it was sort of, everybody, we've done it. Everybody's done it. The content of, how to get started flying an airplane, but to start from 0 hour or -1 hour, and really think about what is it you can do to just stay attached to at least the dream and not lose sight of it. And we're in a time now where there's tons of content and podcasts like this and other things to where you can enjoy so many aspects of the aviation community and all of the nerdery that goes into it and all of the other things. And, we're going to be talking about airplane partnerships later. Think about how much money you are saving while you are postponing your dream. It's a great thing. There's always an upside. And Ben, you've always been the one to reiterate to me in every way that you always reminded me that it's all trade-offs, So those that are listening that are not flying, that are curious about flying or wanting to fly and know that they want to do it someday, but just haven't chosen to pull the trigger yet, please know that you're more than welcome here. We're excited to have you. And I think that folks like that have a great perspective also, that we maybe a particular innocence that maybe some of us have lost in the endeavor of becoming a private pilot. So anyway, thank you, Trevor, for that.
Well, Absolutely. And it's not a purity contest. There's no, I have more ratings than you. I have a plane than you don't. It's all good. Right? Wherever you're at in your training, wherever you're at in your flying, it's all good. It may be
the opposite of that. My landing was worse than your landing.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Seems like that's the competition around here.
Do you want to read Craig's feedback?
I'll take it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So Craig 909, also a new Patreon member. Throughout my PPL training, I listened to several aviation podcasts, mostly with the intent of learning all the ways to not kill myself or others while flying. But flying is more than just not dying. And now that I have my PPL cert, I've really enjoyed the MPP focus on enjoying the ride, which is music to our ears.
Yeah.
That's great. So thanks for that feedback, Craig.
Yeah, that's great. And to emphasize there, we have a Patreon, and we appreciate those that follow. And thanks to both of those new supporters.
Very much so. It's great to be back. I did miss everybody, but it was also nice to unplug for a bit and not use a razor for a little bit.
You've been sailing, man.
So this came up in conversation, and I wanted to bring it up tonight. I've had several people who are avid sailors tell me that there are a lot of similarities between aviation and sailing, aerodynamically speaking. And it hit me. I realized what they were talking about. When you're trying to sail upwind, this boat had, those strings on sailplanes that tell you if you're coordinated or not,
like a glider
on the windshield.
Yeah.
Well, they have those on sails. And there's one that you'll see, you trim that sail just perfect. The one on the outside will be pointed straight out, and the one on the inside will be just hanging limp, which means you've got a higher pressure on one side of the sail versus the other, which produces, I don't know if I want to call it horizontal or vertical lift, but it's pushing the sail just like that pressure lifts a wing.
Are those strings like on the end of the boom, or are they kind of
no?
Like
They're right in the middle of the sail.
Okay, so like when you see a plane that has the yarn on the wing to show it's stalling, it's like that, like in the middle. Cool.
Yes. No. So I just told him the only problem that you guys have is your wing is pointed up and down and should be horizontal to the earth, not vertical to the earth, not perpendicular to it.
My fellow egg pilot, CT Crosswind Adventures, says that they're a sailor as well, and I'm guessing that Barry is as well. Saying that.
The ironic thing is that I got a text from the guy that I took my the DPE on my commercial, we picked up the boat in Marsh Harbor, and the day that we left, he landed in Marsh Harbor and was hopping around the islands in a Cirrus SR-22.
Oh.
And I told him we're averaging about 3.5 knots, and we're going to see a lot fewer places than you're going to see in your airplane. But we were kind of hitting the same spots. He was just getting there significantly quicker than we were.
And you told him, don't do any parasailing in that Cirrus.
Yeah, I should have. Wish I'd have thought of that. But I don't know. I just thought it was kind of small worldish. But
yeah,
it was fun.
Oh, I remember you telling me about tacking.
Yes.
And you were wondering why we don't do that in airplanes if they do that on sailboats. Did we ever get an answer to that, or do you ever have?
I kind of worked it out in my head. The speed that you gain by not having the headwind on your nose is defeated by the distance that you have to travel in the tack.
I see.
Because we have an engine, so we can go directly into the wind, where in a sailboat you can't.
Right.
So tacking is as close as you can get to going upwind.
Correct.
I see. Also, air traffic control will murder you.
Just do this zigzag.
But I'm tacking. I can't help it if he's on final. I need to get my nose out of the wind.
Yeah.
For planning purposes, Memphis Center, we are going to be tacking our way to our destination.
Hey, speaking of that, of ATC not liking the direction you're going, I went out Friday. It's the first time I've been out to the plane for quite a while, a week and a half or so. And I got done with all my work. I'm like, great, I'm going to spend half an hour and go just fly the pattern. You know, it's nice to be back at the plane. I'm looking forward to it. And so I just went out and I just banged out a couple laps in the pattern. And there was only one other plane there when I started, and then I was alone for a while. And they had me on the small parallel runway, and a helicopter was coming in. We've got a lot of helicopter training in some airports in town. And they were flying the ILS in on the big runway. There's only one ILS at that airport, and it is going the opposite direction of the normal landing direction. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's going to happen here. And he was going to go missed anyway. But Tower, because they recognized me, they're like, hey, are you comfortable just making a U-turn and, doing a 180 and landing the direction? I'm like, sure. So I did. He was very happy to not have landings going both directions. I get the feeling there's probably a restriction against that. So it was like, okay, let me land with a little bit of tailwind. Great, right? When you're doing landing practice to do that. And then when that was over, he's like, okay, why don't you turn around again? And so I got to, that time I did a pretty steep bank and really enjoyed just turning around. So that's just one of those interesting things like that can happen. I've never had it happen before.
Yeah, there's never a point in training when it's like, okay, you are landing on runway 21, but there's only one ILS and it is on runway 03. You have just turned left base for 21, and you hear somebody announce short final ILS 03.
Yeah.
What do you do? And you kind of, I've only run into that in scenarios like that, like sort of untowered. And I don't know what it is, but if whoever's flying an instrument approach, and these are people practicing. They're not on a plan, but boy, they sure treat everything like it. It's like, I'm coming in.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, I don't care if there's 3 planes in the pattern in the opposite direction. I'm not even going to try to resolve this. They're just like,
yeah.
I keep waiting for them, right? Because they'll announce and then they'll announce again. And I'm like, when is there going to be cooperation or resolve here? Because you're hearing everyone say runway 21 for all these calls, and you are not.
Right. And as I'm announcing that, I'm like, runway 21, runway 21. As you say it every time,
Exactly.
I finally did that Astoria at the coast for us. People would like to do instrument flights into there, and this guy was coming in on the opposite direction that we were all on. And I finally said, hey, everybody's landing, 08 instead of 26. And he was like, oh, okay. And, he was happy to break it off and go and, circle back to it. But
it's happened to me quite a few times. And I remember the last time I actually I pictured this guy as trying to fly these needles on this instrument approach. probably has a small helmet fire going on.
Yeah.
And I sympathize with that. I've been there before, but I called up and I'm like, there's 2 or 3 planes in the pattern landing this runway. It was at Paulding. We were on 3-1, and I was like, dude, what's your plan? I know you're trying to do this practice approach to 1-3, but you're not the only one here. What's your plan? And then I heard a different voice come on and go, we're going to break it off, go missed, and join the pattern. So I don't have a lot of patience for that. So.
I'm glad to see Barry backed me up that Astoria is the worst for this. Yeah. It's, yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we get into our topic tonight?
Yeah.
Partnerships in airplanes.
Not partners in airplanes, but airplane partnerships. Yeah.
Not seeing the difference, but I'll go with it. Absolutely.
One is who I'm married to and how we address planes. The other one is
I see
the plane and who I'm a partner with on it.
Well, I would argue that I'm married to my airplane, at least as with the amount of money I'm spending on it. It feels like a marriage. So
well, technically you married into your plane as well.
I did. Actually, technically you're correct.
No, technically.
So no wonder you don't see a difference.
That's exactly. We're just going to do a quick round robin about our approaches to airplane partnerships. I feel like I'm probably the luckiest of all of us, easily, in that my brother-in-law, married to my sister, acquired this airplane and just said, hey, I need a partner. I own it. We'll split all operating costs. And when it's time to do an engine overhaul, we'll do a pro rata. So, and just to take a quick step back, we want to approach at a very high level what is a partnership and why people do them. And I appreciate, Brian, you reminding me.
Well, no, here's the thing. I want to hear about everybody's story, and I didn't mean to interrupt that, but I guess I kind of did. But I was just hoping when I put that note in there for you, Ben, I was just hoping that you would just fold that in.
I was trying to think of a segue there, and it just was not clicky. See, if Chris Moran were here right now, it would have been super smooth. But I'm not at the Chris Moran
level.
level.
Try to call him right now?
Yeah. We're not pros. So, we're doing what we can here. So
all right.
This is something that I get when people are thinking about buying a plane is I'm always like, oh man, just find a partnership that's already set up in your area, right? Don't buy a plane by yourself. You're going to have to find the plane, take on all the risk of that. And for a lot of us, the biggest hassle is where are you going to put it? There's no hangars available in your area. If it's an existing partnership, they already have a hangar. Great. And they already have a mechanic lined up. Everything is kind of set up. When you do it on your own, you got to do all that yourself. Obviously, there's advantages of doing it by yourself. I love being the sole owner of a plane, but you also get all the downsides of it. So that's why I recommend people buy a quarter of a plane instead of a whole plane.
So before we get into the weeds of recommendations and our personal experiences, because I'm really trying to think about these folks also that are maybe not even flying, right? Like what are we talking about and how does that relate?
True.
So I just thought AOPA calls it co-ownership on their website, and just to quote what they say, they're basically saying the concept of co-ownership is very simple. It's nothing more than 2 or more individuals sharing the responsibilities of owning an aircraft. Obviously, when you spread the cost out, like you were saying, Ted, then a lot of times that frees people up to get maybe more plane than what they would be able to afford otherwise, and all of that. It goes on to say, though, in a co-ownership agreement, you have the opportunity to select the co-owners, choosing people whose aircraft needs and flying habits complement your own. The term co-ownership is often used interchangeably with partnership. However, these two arrangements are not technically the same. A partnership involves an association of 2 or more persons who carry on as co-owners of a business for profit. Therefore, a partnership involves something far more complex than simple shared ownership. The objective of a partnership is to make a profit. Now, I would say this is also kind of not right because, yes, it is AOPA, but in terms of the colloquial nature and the way that people refer to things in the real world, I don't think that I think this can be misleading. But basically, we're really talking about co-ownerships technically, but we are talking about it colloquially as airplane partnerships. I just wanted to draw that distinction. We are not talking about flying clubs, and we're not talking about getting into a plane with a group of people for the idea that we're gonna rent this thing out, we're gonna do all these things, we're gonna charter, like what. We are talking about just bug smasher morons like ourselves who can't really afford airplanes. This is how we figured out was generally the way to afford an airplane for most of us. And so I just wanted to kind of high level address that.
I think I'm really glad you did. I've been told before, if you can't afford to buy 2 airplanes, you shouldn't buy one because of the operating costs. And without another person to be involved with on an airplane, I'm not sure that I would have ever gotten into aviation. I think maybe eventually I would have, if I would have found out about these partnerships. But it's not cheap. We all know that. And, not everybody has money trees planted in their backyard. And this form, partnerships that we're calling it, is a very realistic way for a lot of people to get involved with aviation.
Yeah.
Yeah. For instance, here in Nashville, flying clubs are usually years waiting lists. And so you're either, at least in my situation, and I imagine many are like this, where you're either going to be renting your flight school planes at a very limited interval of time with a very limited set of options of what you can do. You can't take them overnight. You can't do big trips. You can't take your family somewhere for more than breakfast,
Yeah.
Right. So that's the gulf between, that you kind of have to figure out. So, there's a lot of people don't tell you how hard it's going to be just to fly once you're so focused on getting your certificate that it bypasses you entirely. How are you going to do this? Unless you have the funds to just go buy a plane, which certainly many of our listeners and friends do. I'm not saying that, but I would say a slight majority of us are not in the position to do that. And sometimes, and I think what I want to get into, Ben, starting with you, is that there's some benefits actually to having, not just from a cost basis, but there's a shared accountability, another set of eyes, and things like that. So in your partnership, where you are sharing a plane with your brother-in-law, who is a professional pilot, that probably works out very well for you in those ways.
It does in a lot of ways that I didn't imagine. So he got the plane. We've had it almost 6 years, going on 7 years. And, it's all of his professional flying was done. He's retired now, but with Delta. So didn't have a lot of experience as to when you need to change a cylinder or, the actual nuts and, getting in the weeds with it. But he does have a much broader knowledge of it than I did. I had no knowledge of it when I started. And, having somebody to bounce that off of, having somebody else do some of the work, updating the databases, ferrying the plane to our annual, and taking an Uber ride back, whatever the case may be. It seems like each passing month, there's another advantage to both of us on both sides of having somebody else to take care of something on the airplane. And just from a complete time commitment of handling something. I couldn't understand why he was so thankful while he was working that he had somebody keeping the plane flying. He loved that I flew it so much. I'm flying it thinking, man, I'm burning up hours on this engine, and he's never gets to fly his airplane. And there's a fair amount of guilt, but I came to find out, no, that thing needs to continue to be in the air as often as possible. It's healthy for the airplane. There was a absolute benefit to him to have somebody be training in that airplane and getting a lot of hours in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just splitting the burdens, right? Being able to delegate things back and forth is huge. Even, oh no, who's gonna pick me up from the mechanic across town? Like there's kind of built-in motivation to help with that. Barry, Instigate said you've got a built-in safety pilot. A great example of that.
Yeah.
And it works the other way as well. I mean, he would go 2 months without flying, and he'd ask me to go up with him because he just wasn't proficient in that airplane.
Yeah.
And, as a 90-hour pilot flying next to a guy that had 18,000 hours, he's asking me, what do I think about this? Or what? I'm like, you're asking me? I don't have any experience. But anyway, no, I would tell him what I thought. I was transmitting information that I learned from my instructors, which he hadn't done in 25 years. And he had forgotten most of the small things that you do in general aviation aircraft.
Did you put just clandestine labelings on things that, like, toga?
I put a sticky note across the top of the dash. Don't flare at 200 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not a 757. So,
yeah.
But that's the only partnership you've been in. This is the only plane you've been in, right?
It is the only partnership I've been in and the only plane. I have eyes, I've made it known. I'd love to have a Bonanza, but it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for me to do that. Financially, physically, any way, shape, form. Brian, I want to get to your story, but I want to hit One Dull Geek's comment real quick. Having been both a solo owner and in a partnership, the partnership is so much better. There are few downsides, but they are dwarfed by the upsides, like having someone to bounce ideas off of. So I think that really encapsulates my partnership with my brother-in-law. As I said earlier, I feel like my main responsibility at this point is making sure that he and my sister stay happy together and nothing goes wrong there, because that truly is my fear. And I've kind of hinted at my sister, you better keep this thing going because I'm going to side with him if something happens.
Yeah.
So, Brian, I remember when you texted me a picture of the plane that was turned upside down.
That was right.
You were pretty despondent, and rightfully so. And I think that I had mentioned I'm never on Facebook, and I mentioned that there's a Facebook group for airplane partnerships.
Yeah. And the rest is history. So this is what's funny, by the way, is that was kind of the lamest suggestion you could have ever offered at a time of need. It was the weakest. It's kind of like, it's like if somebody lost their dog and it's like, well, have you looked I don't know. There's a lot of dogs on Craigslist.
Have you heard of Pet Finder? Yeah. I was thinking you're going through a divorce and they send you to match.com. It's yeah.
But with that being said,
it was quite serendipitous. What ended up happening, because you are the sage, and so there is some level of magic or some sort of, I don't know, sorcery or something involved here. I went to Facebook. I looked at the airplane partnership group, and it is the worst group, most useless internet interface for anything, people needing things ever, because it is nationwide, and it's just, all it is people saying, does anybody have a plane near me? And then just nothing. And then it's like, does anybody want to go in on a plane near me? And no, nothing. And occasionally somebody will post something where it's like, hey, we have a share for sale. If you'd like to come out and be a part of this plane in Mena, Arkansas, come on out, or whatever, California. It's this plane's in Sacramento. So it's, if anything, it's maybe good just to see how people are, kind of selling these things, I suppose. But I just thought, this is a joke. Fine. So I go and I type in airplane partnerships. I get to the group and I look, and the very first thing that I saw was 1/4 share available 1968 Piper Cherokee 180 Delta model, this many hours, blah, 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 all these things. Bowling Green, Kentucky, 1 hour from here. And I thought, that guy seems very familiar. And then I went back through, strangely enough, my Facebook messages, and I went back, and I was like, I know this guy. Typed in his name. Sure enough, I had actually had a dialogue with him through Facebook Messenger. I think he had seen one of my videos or something, and he's like, hey, I'm actually near you-ish, come up and fly sometime. I just bought into this Cherokee 180. It's great, come by or let's hang out or, whatever, we'll go for a flight.
Wow.
And he was also a drone operator and we had a bunch of things in common. And I just thought, well, what do you know? It's that guy, So I just messaged him. I said, let's talk, and it was a little bit of a process. And this is maybe where I can be maybe a little helpful to people in the sense that while money is certainly important in this whole arrangement, when you are the person that is the last person to join this kind of aviation polyamory or whatever's going on here. It's like you come into it where you are being looked at and evaluated on a lot of levels. It's not about what pilot experience you have. I mean, it is, but it's also about just what's your vibe. How are you planning on using the plane? What do you seem like this or like that? So got along with the guys just great, but it really was kind of like it really felt more like they will let me know whether they agree to date me or not. Kind of, it was kind of like what it felt like. And actually while I was there, they had kind of batched and there were a couple other people that were coming through. So it was sort of, in a weird way, kind of like an open house or something,
Speed dating.
Yes, speed dating. And, well, like 115 knots dating, but yeah, so, it went really well and I felt very good about it. I got to see, the books. I got to see records. I got to see the log books. I got to see a lot of things. And so it was sort of a process. I had to go back up again, and all these things, but it worked out. And so then I'm in. Now, the value that I saw right away was that these guys they knew every single inch of the plane, and they had done, in cooperation with the mechanic, a lot of things. They had helped with installs for components and things and whatever. So I was happy to know that they really knew the plane and were not afraid to do whatever is needed to get done. And one of them had a lot of experience, was instrument rated. The other was more in the category of about where I was at the time, but a good pilot. And then the other was a partner that had not been around at all. And it was kind of like a person that had bought into it with the idea that they would train one day. They just never did. I think they maybe just like to say that they own an airplane and they're not really concerned about getting out. Here's where I ran into a difficulty with that. Flash forward now, a little bit down the line, several months down the line, things came up for those guys where they were interested in just getting out of the plane. But this also meant that the person that was kind of like this ghostly figure lurking, that person, they had not necessarily been collecting from proper because they didn't feel like it was right. If they're not even, they've never even flown the plane, they were. So I guess the point is, like, you can have all the agreements you want, but there's going to be weird dynamics in play that are kind of personal or in between. And as much as you want to just be strict and run everything like a business, it's just things get sometimes can get a little, I don't know, curved around the edges. So, that ended up being a little tricky getting out when those guys wanted to get out. Also, I was put in the position of, what do you want to do? But I was essentially like outvoted. I was in a position where basically, unless I could save the partnership in some other way, I was just going to kind of be out. And, worked out really, really well. A friend of mine who's here in town who, had kind of watched me train, and then I would take him up on flights, and then he started training, and then all that. He was in the position exactly where I was, where he had been trying to find planes to fly and getting frustrated and all that. And this opportunity opened up. So now I'm sort of in my second partnership on the same plane. And then we kept one of the other guys. It's a whole thing. But anyway, the beauty part of it has been that I have seen what it's like to get into one that I didn't really form, that I was kind of cooperating with. And then I've also been in the position of now we're rewriting the whole thing and kind of shuffling the deck and ironing everything out and getting all the ducks in a row in a way that I think are good. I added a lot of things in the operating agreement, and we're not here to give legal advice. We're not here to tell you what to have in your operating agreement. People can talk about that amongst themselves. I do recommend, AOPA, Pilot Protection Services, and the legal benefits there. If you want to talk to somebody, I definitely leverage that. But
yeah, I mean, the good news is a lot of people have done this, right?
A lot. Yeah, you're not the first.
There's a lot of cases with 2 or 4 owners on a plane, and
yeah, it can get a little bit weird. But I went in and basically said, now's the time where I can impart what I want there to be in the culture of this plane. I'm sort of getting a promotion in a way to kind of being more at the head of the line of this plane. And so I was like, when you bring the plane back, you're going to do these things. Here's the checklist. You're going to, wipe the struts down. You're going to clean the windscreen. You're going to top it off. You're going to, whatever it is, all of the things you need to do. Put the seatbelts back right. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing worse than just getting in the plane and the seatbelts are just kind of thrown all over, and that's maybe flight school stuff that I kind of picked up. But man, I would read every time I was in the flight school training mode and I would go to the plane, I would study everything about how the plane was left by the previous person. And that would give me insights as to how extra attention to certain things in pre-flight or other things. I just want to feel like people are treating this as a sacred act on some level, and everybody's lives are in each other's hands. And that's really this whole partnership thing. When it gets really down to it, there has to be a certain amount of transparency. You've got to be able to share with people, like, I botched a landing really bad, or whatever it is, because everybody's lives and their families' lives are on the line. So it's a very important engagement that, yes, you can cover a lot in an operating agreement, but you really got to choose the right people, and you've really got to, find people that you can communicate with well and have hard conversations with, even when it's uncomfortable, and just say, yeah, I'm just not happy about this, or, whatever. So it's really a relationship in all manners and ways. So that's been my experience. Ultimately, sharing the expense, distributing the effort, like you said, Ben, hey, can you meet me? I'm going to fly the plane down to the airport, drop it off the mechanic. Can you pick me up? Whatever. All those things, 2 or 3 guys working on the annual together with the mechanic. Everybody gets to help each other, save money, combine resources. Everybody has their own kind of tools or their own something that they can bring to the equation that when you're all together, something really good can happen. So I'm a huge fan of it, especially for, I think, midlife pilots who are often in the position of not looking to become professionals, and we're only going to be flying so much, and we're only going to be trying to do so many ambitious things in most cases. And so, there's no reason to, none of us are needing to take a plane for a month as much as we would like to. So,
well, I'll give some counterpoints to that. First, Cheryl says, being a new solo owner is a bit lonely. Would be nice to have another pilot in it with me. I'll tell you that from Cheryl and my perspective, being an introvert and just being able to go do your thing is really nice. I don't have to communicate with anyone else, right? I'm just going to go get in my plane. Don't have to talk to anyone. It's, so I like that. I tend to like doing things solo anyway, but.
Well, if she just, like the pictures of her plane, the panel alone, you could do really well with a partner in that plane.
Yeah.
She's got a beautiful plane.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, being a support pilot really limits you on, the planes. That's really probably the biggest, limitation of a sport pilot is that, you can't just go out and get in a partnership in a 172. There's 5 of those at every airport, right? And that's just not an option. So finding a plane that is looking for a partner and as a light sport is a lot more limited. So I spent a little bit of time trying to do that, and eventually I was just like, okay, that's it. I'm just buying this thing, and it's really nice. For instance, I had no idea how many hours I was going to fly in a year, and it's really hard to come up with how much you're going to charge yourself or your partner if you're flying 50 or 300 hours a year, and also not know what my expenses were. So not having to worry about that extra framework of the hourly finances or those types of things, as well as the obvious things like the plane is always there when I want to fly it. When I want to go fly, 2,000 miles to Utah and California and back, I'm not worried about if the plane is in use. So there's a lot of advantages like that of being that sole plane owner. And so it's
a couple of things. I didn't take our plane to the Bahamas for a couple of reasons, but one of it was because I didn't want to tie the plane up for 9 days where Stuart couldn't fly it. Now I've gone on some long trips and we've talked about it, but that was a pretty big deal. The other thing that you touched on, the beauty of the sport pilot. I mean, your operating costs are probably similar to what my half of the operating cost of the 182 is.
Yeah. Mark, tip writer in the comments, he and I have flown, and it's like, it's expensive to buy, and it's basically free to fly. So, yeah.
So Peter asks, are partnership costs reevaluated periodically based on hours flown by each partner? And I'll speak on my behalf. That was a well thought out part on my brother-in-law's side. All operating expenses are 50-50. I can fly the plane for 50 hours and we're still going to split the oil change. Even though I've offered, hey, you didn't fly this at all, I'll pay for it. And he goes, nope, that's not our agreement. However, when it comes time to replace that engine, it's based on hours flown. And that's obviously the biggest expense that we're going to incur with this airplane. And that's how it should be. I'm not saying everybody should do it that way. Again, and he takes care of all cosmetics. If the plane gets painted, again, I've offered. I put a lot of wear and tear on that paint. And he said, nope, that's not our deal. So he stuck to it pretty well. And it's worked out for us.
Well, that can be structured. Those costs that you're asking about, Peter, that can be reevaluated. I will say there are fixed costs and there are variable costs. And people can sometimes have different definitions of what those things are. Certain things I think are more universal, but some of those things can get a little subjective depending on the prism through which they are looking at the situation, which usually is financial preservation. So, yeah. So there's that. Now, with the reevaluation part of it, for instance, in the partnership that I'm in, I, like your brother, Ben, when we decided that even though the insurance policy is more expensive because of the person with many, many, many less hours at that time and all of that, I just said, we will split that. I wanted this person to be very comfortable getting into the plane, feeling good about the plane. Like I didn't want to start splicing things up that way to begin with. All that being said, with the kind of little post-it note of things are not always going to be this way. And so there was a reevaluation over time on how we're looking at fixed and variable costs, and then how we will be approaching the insurance renewal that is coming up and things like that. We're going to try to make those things a little bit more proportional, but you have the freedom to come up with any agreement that you want that works for everybody. But those things can modulate.
Well, and I think it's important
in writing
that there's never going to be a completely fair way. You cannot spell out in an agreement everything that's going to come up on this and how you're going to address it.
Yeah.
there's just too many variables.
Yep.
So there are going to be aspects of things that I'm going to take on the chin and a little bit higher cost. And there's going to be some things that he does. I want to hit on Alpha Juliet's comment in the chat. The Complete Walk Around channel on YouTube might be a good resource if you're getting into an unfamiliar airframe or airplane. Does a great review of the ops cost, fixed versus variable, etc. I had not heard about this one, and so I appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, he's funny in that very Canadian way. Yeah, it's a great one. It's like, here's how much it'll cost if you fly 50 hours a year, if you fly 100 hours a year. And yeah. I had a feedback that I wanted to read on this topic, except for now I have to go find it. Somebody that was in a partnership that didn't go terribly well. And so what they told me is that there were, they and someone else were both student pilots when they met, and they bought a plane and they both did their check ride in the plane. And then after that is when he realized the differences in personalities and things. He flew with the partner and realized, oh, the partner's pre-flight is super short. They don't even check the fuel or the oil on a pre-flight. They don't use a checklist. They were behind the plane the entire time in the flight. Their radio calls were late and poor. Never bothered using the autopilot or learning how to use it. Did all their traffic citing on the iPad, not out the window. So in summary, quote, complete shit show, bottom out, not seeking another partner. If one comes along that meets my standards, maybe. I don't need a partner anymore. Went on to give some good advice when you're looking for a partner, checking for other partners. And one of those is the importance of doing a background check on the person you're getting into a partnership with. You don't know, for instance, if they've got a DUI in their past, and that's going to really hurt your insurance. And then the thing that I always notice is what's your mission for the plane, and is it compatible with my mission for the plane? And what are your goals for upgrading the plane? If you're not interested in having any new avionics or anything else, and I am, that's going to create a big conflict, right? Because I want us to budget $30,000 to upgrade the plane, and you don't want to do anything. You just want to build hours in it. So those are, kind of some things to think about.
I think identifying the mission is extremely important. And that's one of the things that makes our partnership so great, in that prior to retirement, he was flying for Delta and he wanted somebody flying the airplane, which was a great opportunity for me to get my ratings. Post-retirement, he's got grandkids in Tampa and in Cincinnati, and once or twice a month, he's going to those places. He's going to pick up an Angel Flight mission every now and then, and it just jives very well. He's doing a lot of weekend flying. I'm doing a lot of midweek flying. The missions have worked out almost seamlessly. And I mean, that's just one of those scenarios where I'd rather be lucky than good that it worked out that way. But that's definitely something that probably needs to be discussed ahead of time.
Yeah, and you just want to have a feel for, when you're in a complementary schedule situation, that's really good. And if you're not, just having an intrinsic sense of, I'm not going to book every weekend. If this person can generally only fly on the weekends, maybe I'll only book one weekend a month.
Yep.
And that still gives them plenty to choose from or whatever. It's definitely just a lot of just give and take and being, understanding of other people, but at the same time, not taking any BS, right? I mean, if you see people that are not doing the right things, you have to be able to speak up, and it nobody enjoys that kind of being in that place.
Right.
But sometimes you just have to have the hard conversations, just like your wife, Ben, has hard conversations with you about your beard and whatever other choices you're making.
Yes, the discussions have been had, and I'm not sure how long the beard's going to last. That's okay.
I want to highlight
okay
a couple of comments from Grizzly here.
He
said
like
he really likes owning his own and it being experimental because he doesn't have to get agreement from anyone. I want to install a USB charger. I grab a drill and go to town. That's one of those great things about being experimental is just being able to do it yourself.
What's wrong with those drills? You have to take it back into town for.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And his follow-up comment was
board right now.
Yeah, his follow-up comment was one interesting approach my buddy did. Bought a plane he wanted but didn't have the funds for at the time. Got a couple partners and as he could afford it, gradually bought the others out. So that's a good idea, right? You can afford a fourth of a plane and then just buy out those people a fourth at a time.
It's a different way to finance it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and the other thing too is that as things go on, back to that Peter's question about sort of how do you handle dynamic recalculations of things? The value of your plane is going to change too. And so you've got to make sure that you are insuring it properly and then appropriating that, understanding how that value translates to each person. So there's just a bunch of stuff about it, but ultimately it's awesome. It allows us to fly. I think everybody should look at that as an option, especially if you're newer to flying and you don't have access to something like a flying club and you want to do a little bit more, because you're only going to get the experience that you're going to get by taking that plane and going places and getting out there. That experience alone is so much, it's just exponential compared to what you're going to get by just doing local area flight school plane, continuing in that way. Nothing wrong with that. I did it for a while, but as quickly as I could, I got into a plane where I could just send it. It was actually a plane I was permitted to fly, so that's good. But yeah, I want to encourage people to get out there in whatever way they can, and if this is the way to do it, then do it. But just we'll post in the show notes resources for people that actually know what they're talking about. The actual resources. We have no idea. Ben lucked into his thing. I totally absorbed his luck. And then got into a lucky situation in my partnership. And Ted, the smartest of us all, said, nah, I'm just not going to do it.
Well, truth be told, I had actually gone on to that Facebook group and I saw it. And then that's when I recommended it. So it wasn't as much as luck as you think it was.
Oh, no.
It's been a great discussion. And I appreciate everybody's input, especially everybody in the chat that's contributed to that. Thank you. We appreciate everybody listening and being part of our community. We hope that you'll join us on Patreon if you're not already. You can also send us a PayPal drop. Contact us at midlifepilotpodcast.com. Next week for episode 80, we're going to talk about check ride failures. Did you have a failure? I will be discussing mine at length. We've got some other people lined up to discuss this topic as well. But we would really love to hear your feedback. If you have failed a check ride, there's no shame in it whatsoever. Remember, we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. And so with that, it's a wrap for episode 79 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We look forward to hanging with you guys next week. Thanks for joining us tonight. Good night, everybody.